Recovering in his hospital bed, the youngest of the two brothers, Jahar, was charged with using a weapon of mass destruction. And the White House also announced he will not be tried as an enemy combatant. Now, this has intensified a debate over how to handle terrorism cases in this country. Today, Senator Lindsey Graham urged the White House to reconsider its decision.
I'm asking this administration to leave on the table the option, if the evidence warrants, to designate this individual as an enemy combatant. The ability to have access to this suspect without a lawyer present to gather intelligence about a future attack is absolutely essential to our national security.
Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, a member of the House Intelligence Committee, is out front. He's also a former federal prosecutor. Congressman, good to have you with us. We now know that Jahar, suspect number 2, has been read his Miranda rights, so he's not going to be designated as an enemy combatant. But if he had been labeled an enemy combatant, he wouldn't have been entitled to a lawyer. He wouldn't have been entitled to a civilian jury trial. And, of course, as Lindsey Graham indicated, they could have asked him a lot of other questions without a lawyer present that, may or may not be relevant to national security. Now, why did they make this decision not to go for quote-unquote enemy combatant status? Do they just think they have so much evidence in this case that they can go ahead with a civilian jury trial and they don't need to quote-unquote hide behind enemy combatant?
Well, I think that's certainly part of it. I mean, it does look like an overwhelming body of evidence. But more than that, I think they felt they could get the immediate information they needed by the Miranda exception, the public safety exception, so they could make sure the public was safe. But there just doesn't seem to be a constitutional basis for treating an American citizen arrested on American soil for acts committed in the United States as an enemy combatant. The sort of quintessential enemy combatant case is someone you apprehend a foreigner on a battlefield in Afghanistan or elsewhere. The Supreme Court has upheld treating an American, the American Taliban, Hamdi, who was captured in Afghanistan, as an enemy combatant. But here on our own soil, this is a paradigm case to be treated as a terrorist and prosecuted within the civilian court system.
And I see your point, but, people are going to ask the question of whether terror has changed. An enemy combatant, according to the government, as you well know, is a person who planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, and a person who was a part of or substantially supported al-Qaeda or the Taliban. Now, that worked back when the combat was related to 9/11. But if it has indeed spread and you all of a sudden have extremist groups, whether inspired in Chechnya or somewhere else, that are killing American civilians and it's done by Americans, isn't it the term that needs to change rather than us say the person doesn't fit the term?
Well, Erin, it's a great question. In fact, I think that what you're pointing to is that authorization to use military force, which was drafted in the wake of 9/11, is really outdated and doesn't fit the kind of changing threat that we're facing. We have seriously degraded al-Qaeda's core, but now we're seeing these al-Qaeda franchises, we're seeing these spin-offs, we're seeing a lot of self-radicalized cases, and that's going to require a different approach and a different legal basis. But simply because the threat environment has changed doesn't mean that our Constitution is so flexible that we can ignore its provisions. I do think that what we ought to call on the administration to do is come forward with a new structure to articulate how the rule of law will support protecting the country in this new threat environment. But there just wasn't a case for treating this brother as an enemy combatant, and I think it was very premature for some of my Senate colleagues to call for him to be treated that way.
Interesting point, and also interesting that we do need to really reconsider. Well, thank you very much, Congressman. We appreciate your time.